The Flipside, Disc 7.
On Friday, the 29th of February 2008, the Wayne High School Badgers, the school basketball team in Bicknell, Utah, were playing in the state 1A semifinals. Leading the team was 18-year-old Porter Ellett. At first glance, spectators who didn't know him may have wondered why he was there. Why would a college basketball team include a young man who only has one arm? Porter lost the use of his right arm when he was only 4 years old, following an accident when he fell out of a pickup truck and crushed his arm under the wheels. His arm remained weak, and after over a dozen breaks, he elected to have his arm amputated. "It just seemed a lot less hassle that way," he says. What is even more remarkable is the fact that Porter was right-handed and had to learn how to play all sports using what was his weaker left arm. Despite having only his left arm, Porter Ellett developed into an outstanding athlete. In addition to representing his school on the basketball court, he plays for the school's track, cross-country, and baseball teams. He is not there to make up the numbers. He scored 16 of his team's 50 points the night of the state semi-finals. The team coach, Kate Morrell, says Porter is a natural leader. Porter's got a winning attitude, the coach says, and he's a prime example of how far attitude can take you. Once the game starts, spectators are transfixed by Porter's abilities on the basketball court. He is in the starting lineup because he's an exceptional player who played a major role in the team's success in reaching the semi-finals. When asked how he feels at some spectators' reactions the first time they see him walk onto the court, Porter smiled and said, "It's kind of fun to see people's reactions when they doubt you. And they see you walk out on the court and wonder why you're even playing. Then you get to go out and prove what you're worth." Yet while the spotlight was on Porter Ellett for most of the season, he credits his success to his teammates and friends. "Without my teammates, my friends, I wouldn't be anything," he says. "They are my support. When other people knock me down, they are always there for me." When Porter Ellett was asked to appear on Good Morning America on the 3rd of March 2008, he agreed, but only on the condition that he could bring all of his basketball teammates with him. "They are the reason I am successful," he said. This importance of having a strong network of support from friends and family is something that arises time and again in people's stories of the flip side. Almost without exception, people credit their friends and family with helping them get through challenging times. If nothing else, being surrounded by positive people tends to have a supportive and energizing effect. Mike Yetter is certain that having the unconditional love and support of his family and friends helped him enormously in getting through the years of aggressive treatment for chronic myeloid leukemia. "There is one person in particular, without whom I wouldn't have been able to get through it all," he says, "and that is my wife Bettina." Then Mike added an interesting insight. "I don't think it is necessarily the number of people in your life that counts, as much as the quality of the relationships that you have. There seems to be general agreement among people who have found the flip side that in times of difficulty, it is better to have 1 or 2 devoted people by your side than 100 who are not." When Amit Goffer found himself paralyzed and facing an uncertain future in a wheelchair, and then developed the Re-Walk, a device that helps paraplegics to walk again, it was, he said, largely thanks to a very supportive family, his wife and children, that he was able to overcome his adversity and go on to find the flip side. Mark Pollock agreed. "Having the right people around me was absolutely key," he said, in overcoming the problems he initially encountered when he lost his eyesight. In New Zealand, Anna Fitzpatrick said that her family and friends played a huge part in helping her through the challenges that came with having alopecia. "They have been such a strong support and have let me become my own person. They supported me when I wanted it," she says, "and took a step back when I didn't. Trying to find a cure is what all parents want, But when I decided I was tired of all the medications when I was 10 years old and said I no longer wanted to try and fix my problem, they respected my wishes. That must have been really hard to do, when all you want to do is help your 10-year-old get something back that she's lost. We discussed earlier how our relationships with friends and family are key influences for our feelings of happiness. This goes some way to explaining why studies have found that lottery winners do not wind up significantly happier than a control group of ordinary people. In fact, it may explain why so many end up miserable. Winning money doesn't necessarily enhance our relationships. In some cases, it destroys them. It also sheds light on why people who lose the use of their limbs in an accident, even though they can often be full of anger and anxiety immediately after the injury, relate happiness as their strongest emotion 8 weeks after the accident. Relationships tend to become much stronger and more intimate following an illness or injury. People feel connected rather than isolated, and often draw strength and encouragement from each other. This is why developing strong, close relationships improves people's chances of finding the flip side, following any setback or personal tragedy. As Rabbi Harold Kushner reflects in his best-selling book, When All You've Ever Wanted Isn't Enough, sooner or later, the wave will come along and knock down what we have worked so hard to build up. When that happens, only the person who has somebody's hand to hold will be able to laugh. Chapter 17. Focusing the Mind. Finding Inner Strength. In the midst of winter, I finally learned there was in me an invincible summer. Albert Camus. The scene is set in 1964. A little boy, just 7 years old, sits in front of a black and white television, enthralled by the most exciting TV show he has ever seen. The show is called Maverick and stars James Garner as the hero, the cowboy gambler who could outplay any card sharp. The boy dreams that one day he will grow up and be just like Maverick. He will beat all the gamblers at the card table. Cut to 2008. In the world of professional card shops, no one can touch him. He is not a magician, but what he does is the closest thing to real magic that you'll ever see anyone do with a regular pack of playing cards. As an amateur magician myself, I had heard stories about Richard Turner for a number of years. He is the man, they said, who can deal from the second, top, bottom, and even the middle of a pack of cards right in front of your eyes without anybody suspecting a thing. He makes his childhood hero Maverick seem like an amateur. Richard is both admired and revered in the magic community, and affectionately referred to as the Cheat. I finally caught up with the Cheat, aka Richard Turner, in February 2008 at a lecture he gave at Alicante University on the Costa Blanca in Spain. Along with every other person in the audience, I sat in awe as he demonstrated exactly what he could do with the pack of cards. What he does has to be seen to be believed. At one point, he handed a pack of cards to a member of the audience to shuffle and return to him. He then asked another audience member to imagine that they were playing a game of 5-card poker with 4 other people. "I'm the dealer," he said. "Who do you want me to ensure has the winning hand? Player number 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5? The man looked perplexed and sceptical, as we all were. "Number 4, he answered. But how could Richard take a freshly shuffled pack of cards and then deal 5 hands, but make sure that a specific hand, nominated by the spectator, would win? Without any hesitation, Richard quickly dealt out 5 hands, each with 5 cards, and then revealed each hand one by one. Hands 1 through to 3 contained nothing but a few low pairs. Hand 5 had nothing. But as the 4th hand was revealed, to the utter amazement and disbelief of everyone in the audience, It showed a full house. Everyone in the room was a magician, yet none of them had a clue how Richard had been able to do what he did. No one could believe what they had just seen. I examined the cards myself, and could find nothing out of the ordinary. They appeared to be standard B playing cards used in casinos all over the world. Before we had time to reflect upon what had just happened, Richard followed it up with more equally remarkable demonstrations. Everyone who has seen Richard in person and witnessed his work agrees that he is without equal in the world of card sharps. But what makes Richard's work even more remarkable is the fact that he is blind. After the lecture, I met up with Richard in person, one-to-one. He is an unassuming, gentle man, 5'8" in height, and of medium build. He has blonde hair, clear blue eyes, and has a trim beard and moustache. He certainly looks the part of a card sharp in a black suit and crisply ironed shirt and bolo tie. Aside from the tie, which is rarely seen outside North America, there was nothing out of the ordinary in his appearance. But as I talked to him, I soon realized that Richard is far from ordinary. Richard explained that he began to lose his eyesight when he was just 9 years old. It happened quite suddenly. One day he noticed that he was unable to see the blackboard at school. It wasn't long afterwards that he was diagnosed with a condition known as birdshot retinochoroidopathy. Today the condition is treatable, provided it is diagnosed early enough. But back in the 1960s, no treatment was available. It was incurable, and over time it caused Richard to go blind. By his mid-teens, Richard's vision was approximately 20/400. That means that Richard needed to be 20 feet away from an object that a person with normal eyesight would be able to see at a distance of 400 feet. It is also generally considered to be twice the threshold of what is defined as legal blindness. In his 30s, Richard could still hold a playing card close to his eyes and be able to tell court cards, the jacks, queens, and kings, from the rest of the pack, and he could make out the aces as they appeared as large white blurs. But today, his eyesight has reached the point where he can't tell whether a card is face up or down. Yet Richard has never considered his vision or lack of it to be a handicap. In fact, remarkably, he refers to it as a gift. When I asked him to explain, he said that, in hindsight, his blindness may have been the best thing to have happened to him. He mentioned, for example, that his blindness made him develop his sense of touch to a level that enables him to do the things he does. Part of the reason he can work with cards in the way that he does is that he can feel cards by their weight. The court cards have more ink and therefore weigh slightly more than the number cards. Although the difference is minuscule and undetectable to you and me, Richard has developed his sense of touch so he differentiates the court cards from the number cards. The Research and Development Department of the United States Playing Card Company, the largest manufacturer of playing cards in the world, regularly sends cards for Richard to analyze. The head of the department admitted that he's tried fooling Richard a few times by sending him decks made from old stock mixed with new decks, but Richard always manages to pick up the discrepancies. Richard Turner is one of those people who excels at anything to which he puts his mind. He has studied martial arts for over 35 years and has fought hundreds of full-contact fights, some of which can be seen on his DVD. How does a man who is blind fight against a man who can see? Richard Turner's answer is carefully. At the time that Richard did most of his full-contact fights, while he couldn't see anything directly in front of him, he still had limited residual peripheral vision. But Richard taught himself to see with his mind. This may have sounded far-fetched had we not already met Ben Underwood, who also studies karate, and learned of the work of Paul Bakirita in previous chapters. It is very difficult to detect Richard's blindness watching him train in a dojo, which can also be seen on his DVD. Like many of the other people who have found the flip side in their lives, Richard always looks for the positive in all of his life experiences. He says that his blindness has in many ways been an advantage to him in his work with cards. It stopped him from being distracted by anything that may be going on around him, whether it was television in the home or the things that were going on outside a car or train whenever he was travelling. Consequently, he was always able to practice without distraction. Richard's ability to focus his attention without distraction on whatever he does, he says, is largely responsible for him achieving what he has achieved and becoming the person that he has become. However, the one characteristic that Richard Turner has in abundance is the one that has helped people to find the flip side even through the most severe adversity. It is a combination of self-discipline, mental strength, and a determination to succeed. It is a stubborn refusal to give in to anything or anyone. It is the ability to confront any challenge in the knowledge that every event that happens to us in life has the potential to help us grow from within and become the best that we are capable of being. Inner focus. Richard Turner believes that his blindness contained a gift, not just because it gave him challenges that he would not otherwise have had to conquer, but because not being able to see enabled him to focus more completely on the things he does in his life. This is not to say that he believes it is better to be blind than sighted. Far from it. What it means is that he instinctively learned to look for a flip side, something positive and life-affirming, in all of his experiences. Like so many of the people we have met in this book, Richard has learned to reframe what others see as his disability and focus only on the positive side, the flip side of his experiences. On the 19th of January 2008, Fox News ran a report on a seminar being given that weekend in El Paso, Texas, by a man called Miguel Valdez. Like Richard Turner, Valdez has a 5th-degree black belt, and like Richard Turner, Valdez is registered blind. I am unable to drive, I'm unable to read without extreme magnification, and I'm unable to see faces, he said. He runs his own martial arts school in El Paso, but that weekend he was not there to talk about karate. He was there to address a group of disabled children to remind them that whatever obstacles they may have to face throughout their lives, no matter how big or seemingly insurmountable, if they always looked for the positive side of any experience, they could achieve their dreams. My message for these young people, Valdez said, is not to focus on their limitations, but to focus on what their abilities are and what their assets are, and the things they're good at. The seminar was part of a program called Training Tomorrow's Mentors Today, which aimed at empowering people with disabilities. The program coordinator, Lucila Lozano, said that it was an important message for the children. They may be told by key people in their lives that they can't do things, she said. Unless we all see positive people in our lives, then we may not believe we can reach a certain goal. Finding inner strength. When you feel you have met an insurmountable obstacle, I want you to think of me, and then say to yourself, if he can be successful, I can too. W. Mitchell. San Francisco, the 19th of June 1971. 28-year-old W. Mitchell is on top of the world. That morning, he had flown solo in an aeroplane for the first time. The day before, he had bought a brand new motorcycle, and he was now riding it to work. But life can change in an instant, and it did for W. Mitchell that afternoon. That he would still be alive by the end of that day could be considered a miracle. But the fact that he would find the flip side, and through it happiness and success, is to many a mystery. As Mitchell approached the junction of 26th Street and South Van Ness on his new bike, a laundry truck pulled out in front of him. The two collided, and in the crash that ensued, the bike skidded along the road, crushing Mitchell's elbow and pelvis, and then the petrol cap popped off. The heat of the engine ignited the fuel, and in an instant Mitchell was engulfed in flames. "I became a human bonfire," he says. It was only thanks to an alert man working at a nearby car lot that he survived at all. The man raced over and doused Mitchell with a fire extinguisher. By the time the last of the flames had been extinguished, 65% of his body had been severely burned. Thanks to his helmet, his scalp was largely unscathed, and his leather jacket saved his torso from more serious damage. But his face, arms and legs were hideously burned. His hands were black and charred, and his legs were red and raw. Mitchell lost consciousness and didn't wake up for 2 weeks. When he did finally wake, he was in searing agony, facing a very different future. It took 13 transfusions, 16 skin graft operations, and other operations over a period of 4 months before W. Mitchell was finally able to leave hospital. Once he'd been discharged, he remembers having a lot of time to figure out how to do stuff. He had to relearn how to do things for himself. "I couldn't pick up a fork," he says, "take my pants off, go to the bathroom, or dial a phone without help." But W. Mitchell is not one to give up. He worked at everything, and within 6 months of the date of his accident, he was flying planes again. It takes enormous courage and strength to overcome any major trauma, but to overcome 2 major tragedies requires that much more. 4 years after the bike accident, W. Mitchell crashed his plane. He was the only person on board who couldn't walk away from the wreckage. The impact of the crash bruised his spinal cord beyond repair. He was a paraplegic. Mitchell confesses that he had dark moments. "I wondered what the hell was happening to me," he says. "What had I done to deserve this?" But ultimately, Mitchell is an extreme optimist and has an "I can" attitude. He recalls seeing another patient in the hospital gym, a young man who was also paralyzed. He had been a mountain climber, says Mitchell, a skier, an active outdoors person, and he was convinced his life was over. Mitchell went over to the man and told him something that gave him reason to think again. "Before all of this happened to me, there were 10,000 things I could do. Now there are 9,000. I could spend the rest of my life dwelling on the 1,000 that I lost, but I choose to focus on the 9,000 that are left." What W. Mitchell went on to achieve after his accidents is, by any standards, astonishing. Following his motorcycle accident, he co-founded Vermont Castings, a $65 million company that manufactures wood-burning stoves and employs thousands of people. He later became mayor of the town of Created Butte in Colorado and successfully served 2 terms. During his time in office, Mitchell used $120,000 of his own money in a campaign to save a nearby mountain from aggressive mining companies. He's a self-made multimillionaire, a qualified commercial pilot, a media personality and author. Mitchell is an active environmentalist and sits on the board of directors of the National Parks and Conservation Association and American Wildlands. He's an acclaimed public speaker and currently serves as president of the International Federation of Public Speakers 2008-2009. He skydives and enjoys whitewater rafting. W. Mitchell's life is a testimony to how rich life can be on the flip side of extreme adversity. What he enjoys most is inspiring others to see setbacks as new starting points and to realize that, if he can succeed, so can anyone else. "I hope to be a touchstone for people, a route to a new way of thinking," he says on his website. "Symbols are potent. In America, The Liberty Bell conjures the concept of freedom in a single image. In India, the Taj Mahal shows us at a glance the depth and extravagance of human love. In San Francisco, my adopted hometown, the Golden Gate Bridge is a testament to engineering ingenuity that speaks volumes. What I want is to be a symbol for you. With my scarred face, my fingerless paws, my wheelchair, and real, genuine happiness in my heart, I want to be your mental image of the power of the human mind to transcend circumstances. Looking back at his life since the accidents, Mitchell believes that there were two main things that got him through it all. One was the love and support from his family and friends. The other was his personal philosophy to life. He is an extreme optimist, focusing on his abilities rather than dwelling on anything he cannot do. He pursued specific goals both in business and in his personal life, and he has made his life meaningful not just to him, but to everyone he meets. He enjoys helping and inspiring others. In his speeches, he stresses one key point to his audiences, summarized in a phrase that he chose as the title for his book. It's not what happens to you, it's what you do about it. Reflecting on his past, he's in no doubt that he has benefited in many ways from both of his accidents. I had the good fortune to learn a few important points along the way, both before and after my injuries, that helped me immeasurably. Through his experiences, he says, he has a great life, and he hopes that his story will remind others that even through extreme adversity, they can have a great life as well. But the most telling comment from Mitchell comes from the value he places on his life's experiences. Would I trade what I've learned? He says, not in the world. W. Mitchell overcame two major crises, yet he is adamant that what he has achieved, most people can achieve. I don't have any special powers, he says, or any magical gift of birth that has allowed me to create my own happiness in the face of tremendous trials. I am no stronger or smarter than the average person. I'm a long way from ever being a saintly guy. All of us are blessed with an inner strength buried inside us somewhere. It's just that most don't get the opportunity to use it as much as I have. Chapter 18. Conclusion. Avoid problems, and you'll never be the one who overcame them. Richard Bach. At the beginning of the Flipside, we set out to discover whether the problems and setbacks that we face in life come with opportunities, and if so, how do we find those opportunities? In the search for the answers, we have heard many stories of problems, obstacles, and all manner of adversity that became catalysts for change, from Julio Iglesias and Sir Richard Branson to Oscar Pistorius and Sir Douglas Bader. We have seen financial and personal loss, freak accidents, life-threatening illnesses, and human tragedies transformed into positive and life-enhancing experiences. It may be tempting to defer the future to fate or God's will, and some prefer to believe that life is nothing but a series of random outcomes. They roll the dice, cross their fingers, and pray that Lady Luck is on their side. But in analysing the lives of people like Harlan Sanders and Michael Bloomberg, or Walt Disney and Peter Jones, we are led to a very different conclusion as to exactly what it is that drives our destinies. What has become evident is that in many instances the transformation of a problem or setback into an opportunity is not a random occurrence. Although the precise nature of an outcome cannot be foreseen, that the people involved found something within their experiences on which to build a hopeful future was, in many ways, quite predictable. This is because While every problem brings with it an opportunity, it takes a specific type of person with a specific set of beliefs and behaviors to find it. This is the first key to the flip side. Finding the hidden opportunities in life does not depend upon what happens to us. What matters is how we respond to the challenges that come our way. People like Se-Kun Shan and W. Mitchell demonstrate that even in the face of extreme tragedy, it is possible to build a new and in many ways richer and more meaningful life. That is because they are extreme optimists. They have positive expectations of their future. Without optimism, even in the face of financial devastation, Harlan Sanders might have ended his life wretched and bankrupt. Peter Jones may not have become a dragon, and Tony Robbins may have ended up living on the streets. We know that by becoming optimistic, we dramatically increase the chances of recovering from a life-threatening illness, and leading psychologists from around the world have discovered that whatever we choose to do with our lives, an optimistic outlook will greatly improve our chances of success. In addition to becoming more optimistic, people who find the flip side tend to have an entrepreneur's mindset. They actively look for opportunities and benefits. They look to the future and focus on their potentials and on future possibilities. Se-Kun Shan explained that this was the secret to his overcoming the harsh challenges following his accident. "I always think about the bright side," he said, "appreciating what is left in me rather than wallowing in regret over what has been taken away." When we consider the lives of Ben Underwood and Amit Goffer, a boy with no eyes who taught himself to see, and a man who, through his own tragedy and genius, has made it possible for the paralyzed to walk, we realize that we can never be sure that anything is impossible. With the right attitude, there will always be unexplored possibilities and potential for the future. Finding the flip side sometimes requires us to take a step back and look at a problem from different angles and perspectives. To consider, as Edison did throughout his life, what lesson can be learned from any experience, and what need a situation may expose that will lead us to new discoveries. Had Amit Goffer not been confined to a wheelchair himself, he would not have been drawn to look for alternative solutions for wheelchair users. That he did may enable hundreds of thousands of people to walk again. Had Louis Braille not lost his eyesight, the Braille system of writing and reading for the blind may never have been developed. Likewise, it was only because the price of chemical fertilizers was becoming exorbitantly expensive that farmer Steve Hurd began to look for alternative, more economic and environmentally friendly solutions that could revolutionize farming practices all over the world. And it was only while waiting in a queue for 3 long days that Sanu Kaji Shrestha was inspired to change his life and work to save his country from environmental disaster. The concept of the flip side may at times require us to reframe the way we look at life. Many times we have difficulty believing that a loss can lead to gain, or that failure is sometimes a necessary step on the path to success. We cannot conceive that a tragedy in any form contains within it the catalyst for a new, meaningful life. Yet we have seen that loss can lead to gain on the flip side. When Julio Iglesias lost his dream of becoming a professional footballer, he found a new dream and became an international pop star. When Mark Pollock lost his eyesight, he built a new life full of adventure and excitement that he never dreamed possible, and in doing so, he's inspired thousands of people around the world. Similarly, we have seen that with the right mindset, failure will hold the key to success. A failed superglue became the must-have office stationery supply known as Post-it notes. And Bette Nesmith Graham, a frustrated typist, through her errors, developed a solution that turned her into a multi-millionaire. These and other stories demonstrate that if we can focus on the lesson in all failure and disappointment, we will be that much closer to finding a flip side. In times of personal tragedy, the flip side shows a way forward. People like W. Mitchell, Sekun Shan, and award-winning songwriter Kim Williams testify that it is possible to not just cope with pain and unspeakable loss, but to go on to transform suffering into something more powerful and life-changing than anyone could have imagined. People like Holocaust survivor Dr. Viktor Frankl, trauma survivors like Johnny Erickson Tada, and war veterans such as Captain Gerald Coffey have inspired scientists to investigate how and why some people are able to come through extreme adversity and suffering feeling stronger and more powerful, and certain beyond doubt that they had grown personally or spiritually from their experiences. The resulting studies have demonstrated that any adversity will contain a flip side, because there can always be potential for meaning. Dr. Viktor Frankl discovered through his experiences as a Holocaust survivor and in his work as a psychiatrist that all suffering, even unavoidable suffering, holds potential for meaning, and in the deepest recesses of our hearts and minds, more than anything else, it is a meaningful life that we all crave. Stories from the flip side remind us that perhaps the most important thing in life is the love and support from friends and family. The quality of life is linked to the quality of our relationships. Not only are they the principal cause of our happiness, virtually all people who have found the flip side have acknowledged that their ultimate success was in no small part due to the people around them, their family and friends. Dr. James Rubin, the pediatric eye surgeon who cared for Ben Underwood, underlined the importance of the love and support of those closest to us. In all my experience, I don't think I've ever seen anyone quite as remarkable as Ben, he said. Nor have I seen anyone quite as remarkable as Ben's mom. And I think that is the secret to a lot of Ben's amazing talents. Professor Peter Schulman of the University of Pennsylvania cautions those who think they can face everything alone. Even the die-hard optimist will occasionally have pessimistic beliefs when exposed to extreme or prolonged stress. When the time comes to face adversity, it is made all the more possible by the support of the people around us. Ultimately, the underlying message from the people who have found the flip side is that when things go badly wrong, which they may do from time to time, we need to reframe them and ask questions that will help us find something positive and meaningful. Critical questions that focus on the possibilities ahead of us instead of trapping us in the past. But mostly, the message from the flip side is that life, much as we would like it to be, does not always conform to our sense of fairness or justice. We can look to the heavens or curse fate. But until we can accept that fact, we will never be free to let go of past hurts and disappointments and move on and look forward to the future with hope and expectation. The most enlightening lesson for me that comes from the flip side is that through life struggles, there often comes an astonishing realization that all of us, as individuals, are more powerful than we might otherwise have known. It is an awareness that life doesn't happen to us, it happens through us. Sooner or later, we learn that the future is not determined so much by what happens to us, who we are, and what we become, will be decided predominantly by how we respond to challenges that confront us. This is the most important lesson of the flip side. It is a reaffirmation of the potential within all of us, not just to cope with the challenge of change, but to find something within it that will help us create a better future. Part 3. Reflections. Thoughts on the flip side. Isn't it amazing how adversity introduces us to ourselves? If we learn a valuable lesson in the face of adversity, the sting will eventually go away, and we will emerge a smarter, more resourceful person. W. Mitchell. Do things always work out for the best on the flip side? There are no mistakes, no coincidences. All events are blessings given to us to learn from. Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. While researching this book, I was a little surprised to discover that almost everybody who I spoke to had a story or knew of someone who had a story relating to the idea of the flip side. From people who had lost their jobs, to people who had been diagnosed with a chronic illness or suffered a personal tragedy, virtually everyone agreed that in hindsight there had been a flip side. Most were eager to share their experiences of how their problems or setbacks became to be seen as catalysts that changed their lives for the better. And it was through those discussions that a number of questions and issues were raised that are worth further reflection and clarification in this final part of the book. When I first began researching the flip side, I came across a posting on a blog that troubled me. The blogger was a man who had been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, MS, and he wrote, "I really major league resent people who try to suggest that MS brings something positive in your life, like it makes you a better person or makes you stop and sniff the roses or something equally trite." Of course he was right, or so I thought. What possible flip side could there be for someone who has been diagnosed with a chronic degenerative illness? Are there not some things in life that are so tragic, so devastating, that it would be, as that man wrote on his blog, complete and utter blithering nonsense to suggest that there could be a flip side? How could an illness like MS bring anything positive into someone's life? I continued reading the blog, and was amazed to find that further down the page the same man had acknowledged that MS may have brought some positive things into his life. "When I take my 30-minute walk in the cool of the evening," he said, "she, his 10-year-old daughter, gets to come along with me. And we talk as we walk, something that we seldom used to do." However, taking everything into account, he said that such positives are insignificant compared to the negative things. The promise of the flip side is not that life will be the same following a setback or trauma, because of course it won't. It is also impossible to say whether life will necessarily be better. But what it does promise is that life will change, and in that change there will be new opportunities and new challenges that, if accepted, can offer meaning and hope for the future. I then came across an interesting research study which examined optimism and benefit finding among patients who had MS. Researchers surveyed 127 MS patients for optimism and conscious benefit finding, and then monitored their progress over a period of a year. When the data was collated, the results led to some fascinating conclusions. The researchers had found that patients who consciously looked for benefits in their illness experienced significantly less depression, and those who were optimists fared even better. The report concluded that having a positive, optimistic outlook and consciously looking for benefits can make a significant difference in the quality of life of an MS sufferer. 6 months after reading the blog, I came across a story that confirmed the findings of the researchers and gave further insight into the power of the flip side, even for someone who had been diagnosed with a chronic degenerative disease like MS. Nancy Davis lives with her husband and their 5 children in Los Angeles. She runs her own successful jewelry business, and in her spare time she skis, plays tennis, she exercises, travels, and she has a black belt in karate. Yet at the age of 33, Nancy was dealt a devastating blow. She was told that she had MS. When I was first diagnosed in 1991, Multiple sclerosis was a mystery disease with no known cause and no known cure, Nancy says. There were no drugs on the market at that time to help stop the progression of MS, and she is critical of the doctors who are unable to give her the information that she believes a newly diagnosed MS patient needs. They didn't give Nancy any constructive advice or tell her how the disease might affect her family or her life, and they certainly didn't give her any plan to follow that might slow the progression of the condition or keep her healthy. It became clear from what happened next that there is an answer to the MS sufferer's blog. There can be a flip side even after being diagnosed with a chronic degenerative illness like MS. But the flip side is not found in the disease. It is found in the individual's response to the disease. Nancy Davis did not waste much time or energy mulling over what she had lost. Instead, she immediately started educating herself about MS. This is a trait common to optimists and to people who ultimately find the flip side. Unlike fatalists, who believe that they are powerless and that their future is already predetermined, optimists believe that they have power to influence their future. Rather than lie down and accept the situation, they do whatever they can with whatever they have to make changes. The more she read, the more Nancy was determined to be involved in helping find a solution. In 1993, she founded the Nancy Davis Foundation for Multiple Sclerosis, which has a mission to raise funds for the most cutting-edge, aggressive and hopeful research in finding a cure for MS. In the same year, Nancy organized a fundraising event she called Race to Erase MS. It was held as part of a ski weekend in Aspen, Colorado, and raised over $1.3 million for her foundation. Since then, Race to Erase MS has become an annual event and grown into a spectacular gala benefit and has raised tens of millions of dollars to fund the much-needed research. One of the things that Nancy discovered was that many researchers were duplicating research and rarely communicating with their colleagues or sharing their findings. So Nancy decided to set up what she called the Center Without Walls, a body that funds research in a network of the top 7 MS institutions that have established and innovative research programs. Thanks to Nancy's initiative, all centers collaborate, sharing their findings, and never duplicate any research. This enables them to work much faster in achieving their shared goal of finding a cure for MS. According to reports, MS affects between 250,000 and 350,000 people in the USA and just under 100,000 people in the UK. Over 75% of sufferers are women, and most are diagnosed between the ages of 20 and 40. It is a terrible disease which slowly eats away at the nervous system. Incredibly, in the 16 years since Nancy's foundation was created, it has helped initiate profound changes in the treatment of MS. 15 years ago, there were no medications available to help stop the progression of MS. But today there are 6 drugs approved by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, FDA, with others in the pipeline. While there's no cure for MS yet, says Nancy, we have broken so much new ground in a very short space of time, and we will not stop until we cross the finish line and find a cure for MS. In addition to her work supporting research, Nancy has also written an inspiring book, Lean on Me, which aims to help people who are newly diagnosed with MS and any other degenerative disease for that matter. The book's subtitle, 10 Powerful Steps to Moving Beyond Your Diagnosis and Taking Your Life Back, underlines the passion and ambition of the author. At some point in your life, you or someone you love will be diagnosed with a life-threatening disease. Nancy writes, I get calls from some of the most brilliant, well-educated people who absolutely fall to pieces when they get diagnosed. They don't know which end is up, how to get a second opinion, or how to sort through insurance or medical coverage. The book, she says, is about becoming CEO of your health. In addition to all of these achievements, Nancy Davis also launched a life-saving medical ID program which involves participants carrying their own unique medical ID card, which is supported through a round-the-clock, user-friendly service. It is the first of its kind, as it is linked to a central database that holds users' medical records that, in the event of emergency, can be accessed at any time from anywhere in the world. Nancy Davis doesn't claim to have beaten MS yet, but she is making giant strides. Through her illness, she has touched the lives of thousands of people and played a significant part in the progress of research into finding a cure for MS. And in doing so, she proved that even when facing a chronic, incurable illness, it is still possible to find the flip side. Where is the flip side in an economic recession? Be courageous. I have seen many depressions in business. Always America has emerged from these stronger and more prosperous. Be brave as your fathers before you. Have faith. Go forward. Thomas A. Edison. As I write the final pages of this book, the world is on the verge of economic recession. Many consider that it could be the worst recession since the Great Depression of the 1930s. According to the media and economic forecasters, we are heading for very difficult times. Global banks have gone bankrupt. Businesses are going into liquidation. People are losing their jobs and their livelihoods, and many are losing their homes. This all leads to the obvious question, where is the flip side? I hope that the point has been well made in the preceding chapters that all change brings opportunity, and a recession is no different. The secret to finding the flip side in times of an economic downturn is developing an entrepreneur's mindset and consciously looking for those opportunities. Some businesses do exceptionally well during a recession. For example, tough economic times can seem like Christmas to liquidation lawyers and bailiffs, and where the property sales market loses, the rental market usually gains. Businesses that focus on the changing needs of consumers will also do very well. Cut-price discount stores such as Lidl, Aldi and £1 shops experience a sharp increase in business during a recession as consumers look for the cheapest, best value products. According to newspaper reports, at a time when M&S, a high-end luxury retailer, was showing a 44% drop in profits, Lidl was showing a 22% increase and Aldi a 10% increase. Companies providing outsourcing services also seem to profit from a falling economy. Barnaby Lashbrook, managing director of Time Etc. Limited, a company that offers a range of office support, including secretarial and administrative services, enjoyed a 400% increase in business in the first 7 months of 2008. The company has grown from 6 to 11 employees, and during a period when many companies are laying off staff, Time Etc. is continuing to recruit. Such is the demand for its services. Lashbrook believes the company is prospering for a number of reasons. Firstly, we're helping small business owners to get up and running in a much more cost-effective way than they would have been able to without such a service. We enable them to tap into the skills of a fantastic person but buy just the share they need, rather than employing them full-time. They get the benefit of working with a whole team of people for far less than the cost of employing someone, and they don't have the overheads or worry of office space too. On the other hand, we're also helping bigger or more established businesses that have perhaps lost an employee recently and are looking to downsize the role rather than re-recruit. By making the role more efficient and using the technology we have to schedule tasks, we can normally fit the role into a much smaller time period and produce a massive saving as a result. A relatively new business concept of car hire by the hour has also seen a boom in business. People are able to hire a car in the UK for as little as £5 an hour, which is cheaper than a taxi. And for those who only need to use a car occasionally, the scheme offers huge savings on car ownership. Wizco is a company with a network of low-emission cars located in dedicated parking bays in towns and cities across the UK and hires them out by the hour. According to reports, in the last year, they have seen their business increase by over 30%. Businesses that supply seeds for people to grow their own fruits, vegetables and herbs also have experienced a growth in business as consumers look to save on paying retail prices. Similarly, sales of homebrew kits, which enable people to make their own beer and wine at home, have increased sharply over the past 6 months. During a recession, most people need to either reduce their overheads or increase their income. Any businesses that can offer ways of saving money on essential products and services will therefore do well. At the same time, companies offering home-based business opportunities or part-time work should also be successful. There are also huge opportunities for anyone who has capital, as they can make a real killing buying up properties and shares at knockdown prices. Not many people understand stocks and shares as well as Warren Buffett, who is acknowledged as being one of the world's most successful investors. He is CEO and major shareholder of Berkshire Hathaway, a leading investment company, and he was ranked by Forbes as the richest man in the world during the first half of 2008 with an estimated net worth of $62 billion. Buffett recently wrote about the opportunities available to investors during a recession. At a time when most investors are panicking and selling off their shares, Buffett says, "It is time to buy. Bad news is an investor's best friend," he says. "It lets you buy a slice of America's future at a marked-down price." Buffett advises that over the long term, the stock market news will be good. In the 20th century, the US endured a host of problems. They included 2 world wars and other traumatic and expensive conflicts, the Depression, a dozen or so recessions and financial panics, oil shocks, a flu epidemic, and the resignation of a disgraced president. Yet the Dow rose from 66 to 11,497. It can be argued that even with such gains, many investors lost. Buffett explains that the hapless ones bought stocks only when they felt comfortable in doing so, and then proceeded to sell when the headlines made them queasy. He says that to find the opportunity in business, one has to adopt the approach of Wayne Gretzky, generally considered to have been the greatest NHL hockey player of all time, who once said, "I skate to where the puck is going to be, not to where it has been." That may be the key issue in successfully navigating to the flip side during a recession. Those who win find the opportunities, anticipate changes, and adapt accordingly. There are significant flip sides to be found in a recession. Difficult times force us to re-evaluate how we live and how we work. We may be pushed out of our comfort zones. But for those who choose to look for them, there are still plenty of opportunities to be had. In the end, a recession will tend to knock a lot of businesses out of the market, leaving those who survive a larger share of the market. Is adversity necessary or good? There has never yet been a person in our history who led a life of ease whose name is worth remembering. Theodore Roosevelt. Given that adversity can be the precursor to positive outcomes, and trauma can lead to personal and spiritual growth, people often ask whether pain and suffering are necessary or good. Certainly, as we have seen, pain and suffering can lead to growth and opportunities that would not have otherwise been found. but is suffering necessary for growth? Professors Tedeschi and Calhoun, the leading exponents of post-traumatic growth, are both clear on this point. In no way are we suggesting that trauma is good, they say. For most trauma survivors, post-traumatic growth and distress will coexist, and the growth emerges from the struggle with coping, not from the trauma itself. The doctors go on to emphasize that trauma is not necessary for growth. It is perfectly possible, they say, for people to mature and develop in meaningful ways without experiencing tragedy or trauma. Growth through trauma is never guaranteed. And even though post-traumatic growth is observed in many trauma survivors, life crises, loss, and trauma should always be considered undesirable. Dr. Viktor Frankl, founder of logotherapy, posed the same question. Is suffering indispensable to the discovery of meaning? He was also emphatic in the answer. In no way, he said. I only insist that meaning is available in spite of, nay, even through suffering, provided that the suffering is unavoidable. If suffering is avoidable, then the meaningful thing to do is to put a stop to it. Unnecessary personal suffering, Frankl says, is masochistic rather than heroic. This might seem obvious, but is worth clarifying. When a man called Wendell from America's Deep South appeared on the Jerry Springer show in a wheelchair with both of his lower legs missing, it was clear to the audience that there wasn't much meaning to be found in his condition. Wendell was a strapping man covered in tattoos. When asked how he had lost his legs, Wendell said that he had decided one day that he didn't like them, so he sawed them off. It was clear to all watching that Wendell was of a questionable state of mind. It didn't help his cause that he was wearing a skirt, he was wearing makeup, and that he had changed his name to Sandra. There is little doubt that there is not much to be gained, no greater meaning to be found, in self-mutilation. Although, ironically enough, Wendell said he slept better without his legs. Is optimism always the best option? Be an optimist, at least until they start moving animals in pairs to Cape Canaveral. A non. Despite all the benefits of optimism and what it brings to our lives, there are times when optimism would not be appropriate. Professor Martin Seligman states that if the cost of failure is high, optimism may be the wrong strategy. If you are planning for a risky and uncertain future, optimism will not pay. Seligman warns that when there is a high cost of failure, optimism needs to be tempered with caution. The pilot deciding whether or not to de-ice the plane one more time, or the partygoers deciding whether or not to drive home after drinking, should not use optimism, he says. The risks are too high. Optimism would also not be a good strategy when entering a casino, unless you're going to count cards, because in the long run, the laws of probability will prove that the house is always going to win. Even the most ardent optimist will lose. Professor Susan Segerstrom offers similar advice. Optimists tend to be persistent, she says, but there are times when giving up is the better option. She gives the example of a man trying to get a date with a woman who he finds attractive, but who does not reciprocate his feelings. The man may ask the woman out 2, 3, perhaps even 4 times, but at some point, if she continues to show no interest, he will need to give up. Hopefully, Segerstrom says, before the object of the man's affections gets a restraining order against him. Basically, Segerstrom advises that the chances of success need to be balanced against the cost of failure. If the chances of success are infinitesimally small and the consequences of failure are high, then the best option is to accept defeat. Optimists are high achievers because they are prepared to take risks and invest their resources to achieve their goals. But those risks need to be weighed and balanced against the cost of possible failure. In times of grave or serious risk, it is as well to adopt the Arabic saying, "Trust in the Lord, but tie up your camels." What is the alternative to the flip side? Life is change. Growth is optional. Choose wisely. Karen Kaiser Clark. When faced with problems, setbacks, and adversity, there are two choices. Either we start looking for the flip side and build a future, or we stay where we are and cling on to past memories. When life becomes difficult, the flip side gives hope. Without it, there is a danger of becoming entangled in what is known as the negative spiral. The negative spiral is not uncommon among people who are diagnosed with a debilitating or life-threatening illness. Many people diagnosed with cancer or MS or AIDS come to regard their diagnosis as a death sentence. On learning of their situation, negative, pessimistic emotions can propel them into a negative spiral of increased hopelessness and depression. The spiral turns into a downward freefall that exacerbates the situations which can trigger self-destructive behaviors and cause the person to sink deeper and deeper into an abyss of depression. Reports show that people who become entangled in the negative spiral are often dead within a shockingly short period of time. By learning to become optimistic and searching for the flip side, patients experience a far superior quality of life and enjoy much longer survival rates. By taking better care of themselves, following treatment regimes, dietary management, and exploring alternative and complementary treatments, even patients who have been diagnosed as being HIV positive can extend their life and, with the rapid rate of medical advances, may live long enough to receive newer, more effective treatments. Epilogue. The changing room doors slowly swung open, and the boy stepped nervously into the pool area. The shouts and screams gradually stopped, as one by one the other children turned towards him. He could feel everyone's eyes upon him, and he could certainly hear some whispers. He struggled to stop his eyes from welling up for the second time that day. He had made a huge mistake. This was exactly what he had feared. Just an hour earlier, he had been talking to Mr. Greenstein about the flip side, and they had discussed the critical questions. What is good about this? What could be good about this? What could I do right now to turn this to my advantage? What could I learn from this that would benefit me? What could I learn from this that would benefit others? At first, the boy had said that nothing was good. But when it was put to him, he had agreed that perhaps this could be an opportunity to show courage, and it could be an opportunity to win the respect of his peers. It might also be an opportunity to find out who his real friends were. He could also look at this as a personal test, a test to see whether he was strong enough to face his fears or run away from them. If he could overcome this fear, it might help him overcome other fears that he may have to face in the future. And if he could overcome this fear, he might be able to help other people overcome similar fears. But aside from all that, this was supposed to be his opportunity to learn to swim, and he had to decide whether he was going to let his fear of what the other children might say to him or about him stop him from learning to swim. "You cannot lose," Mr. Greenstein promised. "Whatever happens, if you walk through those doors, you'll come out a winner. If you decide not to go, nobody would blame you or think any less of you. But if you can face your fear, you may just find the flip side." And so it was with trepidation that he walked through the doors from the changing room and into the school swimming pool. His first thought was, "What am I doing here?" And then, "How could I have been so stupid?" He stood alone. Even though he wore swimming trunks, he felt naked, worse than naked. The red scaly lesions all over his body were there for everyone to see. "What am I doing?" he mumbled to himself. He decided it had all been a huge mistake. He shouldn't have come, and was about to turn around and run back out. And then something unexpected happened. His best friend George climbed out of the pool and ran after him. George caught up and threw his arm around him. "Come on, we need you!" Then some other boys jumped out and ran towards the two boys. "Yeah, come on!" Two of the boys grabbed him and pushed him into the pool. George followed and jumped as high as he could into the air, brought his knees to his chest and bombed, making a massive splash. I can still hear the screams and the laughter, and when I close my eyes, I can see the general mayhem in the pool that afternoon. That day, I learned about facing and overcoming fears. I learned that I had some courage and that I was strong enough not to let my fear hold me back. I learned that people don't always see what I see, and sometimes our fears are imaginary. I learned that I had friends I could count on. But most of all, that day I began to understand about the flip side. As a result of having had psoriasis, I became more introspective and more sensitive as a teenager. But I believe that it also helped me to change and become the person I am today. I adopted a healthier diet and lifestyle, and in my mid-20s, I gave up a career in law and retrained in physical therapies and naturopathic healing sciences. I opened up a small natural therapy clinic, and not long after, I became a regular columnist for the Nursing Times and Health Guardian, writing about the latest research relating to alternative medicines and complementary therapies. Doing my research of alternative medicines for my monthly columns, I came across a plant remedy that had been shown in controlled clinical trials to help over 80% of psoriasis sufferers. To my amazement, the remedy was not commercially available, and I later learned that pharmaceutical companies are not interested in natural plant extracts that cannot be patented. With no patent, a treatment or remedy is not considered worthy of any significant investment, and so a natural remedy that was proved to help 4 out of every 5 psoriasis sufferers had remained ignored and hidden for years. As no pharmaceutical company would consider introducing a product without a patent, I decided to set up a company to manufacture it. In 1996, for the first time in the UK, fellow psoriasis sufferers had something natural, free of corticosteroids, that could offer real help. A few years later, I wrote my first book, which was followed by 6 more, and you're now listening to my 8th book. More importantly, I have some outstanding friends. I married a beautiful woman and have 2 wonderful children. And in all that has happened, I found some meaning and purpose in my life. So do I ever regret having been afflicted with psoriasis since I was 8 years old? Absolutely not. In the words of Oscar Pistorius, who when asked whether he ever wished that he had been born able-bodied with 2 feet, replied, "No. If I had legs, I know that I wouldn't be the same person I am today, and I'm happy with who I am." Too often, we look back with regret and longing for what might have been, and in doing so, we miss the opportunities that lie in front of us. I hope that this book brings a message of hope and encouragement in times of adversity and change, however traumatic those times may be. Instead of looking back, we can look straight ahead with confidence and expectation for the future. And by asking the right questions, all of us can find the flip side. The end.
You have been listening to The Flipside by Adam J. Jackson. Narrated by Gordon Griffin.
Want to find out more about Whole Story audiobooks? Visit us at www.wholestoryaudiobook.co.uk. Here you'll find hundreds of best-selling titles, together with sound clips, narrator profiles, author interviews, and much more. Alternatively, contact us using the details on the cover to receive updates on new releases. Whole Story audiobooks. The whole story as the author intended.